This is Freedom Isn't Free. I am Brandon Gentili, and my guest today is Brad LaBrie. Brad is the founder of House Hacking Success, dominates Instagram, and hosts the House Hacking Success podcast. Brad is a house hacker, real estate investor, top producing real estate agent, and promoter of financial freedom through eliminating your housing expense. Brad, welcome to Freedom Isn't Free.
Brandon, I really appreciate you having me on, man. I'm excited.
Awesome. Yeah, great having you here, man. Really quick, love the word freedom, obviously, it's something we just touched on, obviously, and what you are, a lot of what you're about, obviously, is achieving freedom. And here I always tell everybody, we're trying to achieve freedom in all areas of life, not just financially, obviously, but every area of life. And that's really what it's all about. What does that mean to you on the financial freedom side, just helping people and educating people doing that? You touch a lot of people and you do that a lot. So, what does it mean to you, kind of get into that? And then also your story, how'd you start and how'd you get down this path and end up where you are today?
Yeah, well, those are some loaded questions. But I'm a very nuanced person. That's just kind of my personality. That's why I'm drawn to people like yourself. So I was drawn to your podcast, what you're doing here. A lot of our mutual friends are friends, and kind of turned me on to you and what you're doing here. So I love what you're doing. But generally speaking, my personality is very nuanced. I like to evaluate situations, take a 100-foot approach to things, and kind of be able to just step back. But there many books, set me on the right course. A lot of sort of people. I was flipping in the same town you were, Flushing, and kind of doing that thing, and the whole capital gains tax at the end was kind of killing me. And so I'm like, man, there's got to be a better way. And so I stumbled on the approach of house hacking, and I figured out you could do essentially the same thing. They call it Burr house hack. I had no idea of either term necessarily, but you could renovate a property and dramatically increase the value of it, and then capitalize on that equity without paying taxes, because the federal government doesn't tax borrowed money. So essentially speaking, if you took out $25,000 off the top of a property after you renovated it, that money is not taxable. So that was really the origins of it, why I was so drawn to it. And we can kind of get into the weeds on some of the things I did there. But overall, I mean, house hacking, and I didn't really quantify it at first, but in my opinion, and I know you would agree with this because we both are doing the same exact thing here in Genesee County, but it is the ultimate way to capitalize on freedom. Because especially if you're younger, I mean, our audience is younger. House Hacking Success. I implore everyone to check us out. Just get involved with the community, because that's really the only reason we started it. Honestly, we just wanted to start a local community, my buddy and I, and it's turned into this national community. It's just absolutely off the charts. I could have never dreamed up what it has become, but it's now turned to freedom, because of artificially inflating our society and the cost of living. It's really, really, really tough to be a millennial or a younger generation individual and get ahead the way our parents did, and so I am not opposed to the American dream, to the traditional house. I mean, I'm a real estate agent, of course I help people in that manner. My wife and I, our goal is to buy a nice piece of land in a good area, have a remote piece of property, build a house traditionally, so I totally understand the benefits of owning home, the benefits of a single family house. But there's a way to get there. And that's what I like to get through to people, is the fact that there's if you can take a staged approach where you Set for Life was the book when I was younger by the CEO of Bigger Pockets that kind of really quantified it for me. The stages of it. If you could take your early life and take a staged approach, house hack for 2, 3, 4 times, whatever, maybe even once, but allow those properties to pay for the American dream, and that's really what it's been all about for us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's like you said, I think that we're just entering, whether it's higher tax environments because of the currency we printed, it's just, those things are inevitable. And like you said, it's harder and harder to achieve the American dream because of a lot of the financial decisions that have been made over the last 100 years. At the start of the Federal Reserve, things like that. And just they've made it harder by inflating money away, losing purchasing power. So there's ways around that. And I think what you're doing, obviously, the podcast, and just getting the word out there is one of those huge ways people can do that. So really quick, you kind of touched on a little bit, obviously, but house hacking, what is it? I mean, I know there's some variations of it, but kind of break that down and kind of what it truly looks like. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have heard that term, and probably don't totally know what that means.
Yeah. So I was literally right before this, just on a phone call. We had about 30 house hackers on there, and it's kind of intriguing where it's come from. We had the number one mortgage banker in Miami, Florida, on there that was like had just stumbled upon the term house hacking, and he was like asking all these questions. It's sort of blown me away, what it really means to a lot of different people. Two of the people on the phone call are really good friends of mine in Austin, Texas. And what that means to them is that they have such low supply of housing that they are building new builds, and house hacking these new builds. So it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. But the traditional form, what I've taken on is the fact that you can, the U.S. government, it's never been easier. Let me step back. It's never been easier to finance a 1 to 4 unit property. And the U.S. government backs these properties. And so if you look at it in the history, sort of a 40-year macro history of financing, you look at what our parents went through in the 80s, where they had, upper teens interest rates, right? And they had none of these federally backed loans. And again, we can get into what you get into of currency inflation, a lot of these things.
Explain that really quick. When you say government backed, sort of someone doesn't know what it's so like FHA, VA, like that type of stuff, obviously. Yeah.
Let me I'll finish thought and touch on it real quick.
Okay.
But going through like the macro, of course we've and that's why I love listening to your podcast. A lot of people like you, because you talk about the inflationary environment we're in and how they're destroying the US dollar and things like that. But if we set those things aside for this conversation, and we look at strictly the fact that they had to pay these high interest rates, they had no federally backed loans and things of that nature, and where we are today, where we can utilize a 0% to 3 to 5% down loan and get a 3% interest rate. 2.5%. I just had a client get a 2.5% interest rate on duplex, and he's going to live in it and he's going to move out. So, that's where we kind of are in the macro history. But to touch on your point, yeah. So the federal government backs these loans. VA, like you said, 0% down. FHA, rural development loans, like there are quite a few different federally backed loans. And what it allows, it takes the risk off the lenders. And I'm not a lender. I'm not going to pretend like I am a lender. So I'll leave that to the lenders to kind of describe all the nuance of it. But what it allows for you, the consumer, is the fact that you can put such dramatically low down payments. Because our parents, again, if we look at a history lesson, they had to put 20% down. That's why a lot of people still think you have to put 20% down on these properties, but you don't. The federal government came in and backed it. So if you look at the history and where we are at interest rates, you can literally buy a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex for 2.5% interest, 3% interest rate, lock it up, fixed rate, 30-year debt. I live in the world of investors, and now my wife and I, we're investors where we buy properties that we don't move into. If you look at the world of commercial lending, you got balloon payments, right? 7 to 10 years, you got a balloon, which for people unfamiliar, that just means that you got to either buy the property outright or refinance it, right? You don't get fixed rate debt. The interest rates are dramatically higher, 2% higher, interest rate percentages higher, generally speaking. So we're so fortunate that we can lock it up fixed rate, meaning that the payment will never change. They will literally, I have a couple of them. I could, they'll literally show you every single month from year 1 to year 30, what the exact dollar amount of the payment is. And of course, there's a little bit of a, insurance could change, taxes might change, right? So there's a little bit of a nuance, but as far as the payment, it's never going to change. You don't got to worry about them calling your loan, right? All these things that commercial lenders and commercial borrowers have to worry about, you don't have to. And again, I'm getting into weeds here, but basically the concept of house hacking is attempting to live for free. That's what we promote. And so what you and I do, we live in a duplex. Again, you have 3 kids under the age of 4. My wife and I are having our first kid here in a month. And so we have a renter next to us. It's like a side-by-side condo type situation. And so they pay for the mortgage, right? We live for free. When we move out, we'll cash flow, of course. And that's what we aspire to do. Low down payment, low interest rate environment. Of course, every property we get, we value add. So I don't necessarily advise people, putting a low down payment and leaving it there. But there are ways to force appreciate properties. You come in, you fix them up a little bit. I'm not talking about major things, but sometimes paint and carpet can go a long way. And doing certain things like that. But and we can get into weeds. I'm not sure what direction you want to go to, but that's the concept.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and you're kind of laying that out for everybody and framing that as we go here. So you just mentioned even value add. I think that's a huge part of something that I believe a lot of investors miss, which is value add. And like you said, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It can be carpet and paint and just making something that much better than when you got it. And and then you touch on refinancing, right? So I mean, kind of talk about that and how that plays into your strategy going forward. Because some house hackers just buy it and then they live in it and then they leave and then you get another renter in there and don't really think about some of the things you can do to extract more value from that, force appreciation, etc.
Perfect. So let me this is a perfect lead into a personal example. And this is, again, there are different sectors for different types of people. This is a very aggressive approach. So people may not, relate to this, but if there's an investor out there that would like to get aggressive, there are renovation loans, right? And when you get a renovation loan on a primary mortgage, it's incredibly incentivized, right? Like you get top of the line interest rates, so for instance, FHA has an extension, which is called the 203K loan, which is a renovation loan. So for instance, I bought a 3-unit, turned it into a 4-unit, utilized the 203K loan. It was roughly about a $70,000 renovation, completely gutted it, changed the HVAC, just went through the whole property, and utilized the 203K loan, which is a renovation loan, meaning that the bank paid for the renovation. So yeah, took it, forced appreciated it. I mean, the property value went up 2.5 times from what I purchased it at. I moved into the small 4th unit that I created, which was a 1-bed, 1-bath, which meant that while I lived there, I cash flowed somewhere over, I can't remember, honestly, I don't remember the numbers, but it was somewhere over $1,000, $1,000 to $1,500 while I lived there. Moved out, now we cash flow over $2,000 a month on that particular property. And so for an aggressive investor, there are quite a few different renovation loans. VA has one, conventional has one, which is the home style. 203K has one. Generally, a lot of these loan products have renovation loans. And as you know, in the real estate industry, now is a little bit challenging for some of those loans. It's not impossible, but with how hot the market is, those can be challenging. But it's for an aggressive investor that is looking to do something like this. I mean, you can really capitalize on forced appreciation using the bank's money.
Yeah. I mean, it's just funny because I think about all the we talk about macro and currency and inflating the money, the currency supply and things like that. And I just can't help but think this is truly one of the best strategies really anyone can use, whether they know it or not. And that's one of the things I was going to ask you is, what is something you talked about, a broker in Miami or a lender coming and talking to you guys earlier and not knowing about this and obviously making a lot of earned income and doing a good job of what he does, but then being able to shelter his money he's making by maybe doing this for a little bit or whatever it might be. But I just can't help but think this is such an incredible way for people to, like you already mentioned, shelter from taxes, build equity, build wealth. Because, going forward, whether like you just said, adding an extra unit onto a house or whatever it may be, because like, let's be honest. I mean, in the future, as we go here with the purchasing power going down and people's wealth diminishing, that's the stated goal of the Federal Reserve. Yeah, that's going to happen more and more, where people are living together. You have families living together and opportunities, whether it's friends, family, it doesn't matter, people you don't know. I just can't help but think this is one of the strategies to use going forward by far. What is something that most people don't know when they come and talk to you about this? Maybe they find your podcast, they're on Clubhouse with you or whatever it might be, on your Instagram, they're asking you questions. What's the number one thing you see the most that people come to you and say, hey, I got a question about this, or like, hey, what are you doing, Brad? Like, what is like that one thing that people just either they don't grasp right away, or they don't think about it? Maybe it is like, maybe they just don't know. Maybe like the guy you said earlier, he just didn't know about it at all. What is that one thing you think?
Yeah, well, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so
True.
to back up to my first story, the first house I bought was I got it for like, I don't know, I think I traded a truck for it and I had to pay a bunch of back taxes and water. And so I'm sure and so anyways, my tenant got murdered and I lost the 10 or 15,000 I put into the property. So and that was when I was 20 years old. So I had to like take a step back. And I played football in college. I learned very early the benefits of teamwork, working as a team, right? And so I always gravitated towards making connections like we are today. You and I, have become friends on social media and just talking and working through situations. I've always gravitated towards making connections with people, just for the sake of making connections for people. Most people want to have an ulterior motive, and that was never me because I just saw the value. After I did that, I went and talked to somebody and I just said, listen, I'm 20 or 21 years old, whatever I was. Like, what is the one thing that I should know? Like, if I could just take one thing, tell me, and I'm going to go do it. And he just told me, go buy the worst house in the best neighborhood. So that's where I started flipping. But to go back to what you said, I didn't come from money. I don't even know if I knew that there was such thing as a duplex, triplex, or fourplex. I don't even know if I knew apartments existed. I didn't think anything of them, right? So most people don't even understand that world, that there are these properties like me, and so I grew up in a single family house. I'm like, everyone owns single family houses. I'll go flip a single family house. So it took me like 13 months, my first one, which was in Flushing, and I continued to flip after that. I actually partnered with that particular guy that told me that piece of wisdom
Oh,
at
okay.
first, and
Yeah.
we flipped after that. But I think it's that, and I happened to stumble upon a Bigger Pockets book, Brandon Turner, and he had mentioned the fact of the 203K loan, which I thought was amazing. And if, by the way, if anyone's out there trying to do that, 100% contact me, because if you don't find the right person, I can show you how to find the right person. There's a incredible government site that shows you, if you're in the state of Michigan or if you're whatever state you're in, it'll show you what lender is actually closing on these loans, because if you don't find a lender that doesn't know what they're doing with this thing, you'll be in for one heck of a time, like I was.
Yes.
But so I stumbled into it, and that's kind of how life is. If you're willing to just put yourself out there and fail, and that's something I was taught in football. We just had this NFLer on, which is incredible story. He was a Detroit Lion. He was a tight end for the Detroit Lions, and he's played for 3 different teams around the country, and he's house sacked in every city he's been in. And so
That's awesome.
he house sacked
Yep.
in Metro Detroit. And but we talked about this at great length. It was the coolest conversation I've ever had about quantifying what we actually learned playing football, and sports in general, and what they actually teach you without you ever knowing you're being taught this. And that's one of the reasons, my primary reason I'm here where I live now. We won the Division I state championship in football. I played for the head coach there back, in a different high
Yeah.
school. And they're trying to do it again today. They're playing Detroit Catholic Central to go to this state quarterfinal, if I got that right. But
Yeah.
you learn things such as, we would work 9-10 months a year to play play 2 or 3 months. You know what I'm saying? Like, we would spend
Yes.
all spring and summer preparing for those few weeks in fall, right? And
Yep.
like, I didn't know it then, but it built something in me to where I just knew the world of delayed gratification. And like, if you just stumbled forward. And so that's been my whole life story. If you look at the macro of my life, it's just the ability to stumble forward, the ability to fail, but more importantly, the ability to bring teammates on me and go to somebody like Brandon and DM Brandon, like, hey, if you could tell me one thing, like, I don't need you to tell me what I should do. I don't need you to tell me, whatever, but I just want you to tell me one thing that I should do, or probably even better, especially if you're trying to get in real estate, use you as your real estate agent. Incentivize people to work with, incentivize people to be a part of your life, that's another concept. And again, I'm getting into weeds here, but
No.
reaching out to people like yourself, knowing that it's a team game, knowing that if you're going to, if you want people to come with you, you're going to have to incentivize them to a certain extent, and bring everyone along with you, and that was something that sports really instilled in me.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to touch on this too, and we I think we briefly talked about it in the beginning as well, but elaborate some more on your story a little bit too. I mean, we kind of we went right into stuff right in the beginning, but playing football growing up, like you said, you already touched on some of this, but what was that story that led you to this? Some of those aha moments where you took those lessons from football and then you, like you said, you stumbled into it. I think a lot of us have those same stories that didn't grow up in maybe an entrepreneurial family or with a trust fund or whatever it is. You had to kind of, you had to keep an open mind. And that's really how you find things in life, right? You're always seeking, you're always looking for different answers and new answers and trying to learn. So, what was that process, that story like for you in the last, 10 years or so, 15 years, where it was like, hey, I'm doing this, I'm going to school, I'm playing football, I learned these lessons, and then I found this and it opened up X for me.
Yeah. So, I don't like to talk about it too much because of, my story wasn't that, dark of a childhood, but like I went through some things, our family had a lot of turmoil, parents split, like it was just a lot of things in my early life that shaped me when I was younger. And so I didn't have a whole lot of confidence. My saving grace, honestly, was football. And that's really my, people ask me sort of like what my goals are. I mean, probably my main goal is to get back, coaching football, because it changed my life. It is who I am today. Just giving kids an outlet, especially kids that come from challenging circumstances, an outlet to express themselves without necessarily needing words and stuff. There are a lot of things that do that. Football is not the only one, but for a person like myself who is, inclined, athletically, I mean, but anyway, so I went through a lot of things. It completely changed my demeanor, my manner. And so I kind of bounced around. I went to a few different schools, and I never really made a whole lot of friends. And even if I did, I had to like work. I felt like I had to work really hard to gain people's approval. So it led to me doing things that I shouldn't have, and things like that. But my saving grace, again, to touch back, was being athletically gifted. And so I was shy, and whatever, but I was incredibly good at football. And so it gave me, or, people knew who I was to a certain extent. Right. And so it gave me
Yes.
a lot of confidence, because, not to like sound pompous or whatever, but like I was very gifted. People really knew who I was. And so literally during high school, the only thing I ever wanted to do was play college football. And, I'm 5'10", 165 pounds back then, maybe soaking wet. Right.
Yep.
So like the idea of me playing college football is pretty damn low. So, people didn't really give me a shot. It was a chip on my shoulder. I really enjoyed that chip. I worked tirelessly. I mean, we'll get into my story later on, but like I've just always, football instilled the fact that like I like working every waking minute I possibly can. It's just instilled in me for the most part. So I never once even considered like a major. I never once considered that going to college implied that you actually had to study and get grades. I just knew that I wanted to go play football. So
Yep.
I did. I got a scholarship, played football, but I got up there and I'm like, man, like this whole like studying and getting a degree stuff's for the birds. So being a young kid that was just a young jock, I'm just like, screw this, man, I'm going to another college. So I left, and long story short, I dropped out of college shortly thereafter. So it just because the college life wasn't for me. And so, I quickly turned to, I'm just going to go work. So I started working. I ended up working, a couple, but I was in construction at first, kind of had my own company, got into General Motors, which is a local company between you and I. And so I just started working, and got into, of course, real estate. Now I am a real estate agent as well. So we buy properties, we go for the cash flow, because my goal, I set like 6 years ago, was to leave GM by 30. And if, not the GM's the end all be all job, I see that now. But from where I came from, my dad worked for General Motors. I'm third generation General Motors. If you got a job at General Motors, that was you were set. You were set for life.
Yep.
That's what I grew up with. Like if you get into General Motors, there is no better job. There, what I'm saying? Like that's just that's all I knew.
Yes.
And so when I set that goal, like I kind of scared myself. I'm like, shit, like there's no way that's gonna happen, But anyways, I'm 27 now. I'm leaving General Motors in March. Is our goal here. And so
Awesome.
I work the night shift there. I work all day selling real estate, and we buy we buy investment properties. And so that's pretty much my story in a nutshell. But it all started back then. Football was that thing that gave me the confidence in myself that I was the controller of my decisions. I was the one that could or couldn't. I mean, I surprised myself getting a scholarship, getting the top scholarship of my entire incoming class into my particular college that I went to. So it really just set me on a good path for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a great story, man. I mean, like that's where I think everyone can learn from everyone's story, and it's no matter who you are. So I think that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. So jumping back a little bit to some of the house hacking and just investing. I feel like a lot of investors, whether they're like house hacking, a lot of times can seem like, oh, it's just for when I'm starting out. I mean, is this something that people can do when they're 50, when they're 20, when they're 70? I mean, is this for any and all ages, any and all income brackets? I mean, is this something that's wide open for everybody?
Everything's so personal. Everyone has different stories. Everyone has different ideas of what they want to do with life. There are people that literally house hack that we're friends with that wanted to travel. There are people that wanted to do a specific niche. My best friend and co-host of the podcast, when we met, he was a professional bowler. He was incredibly good. He traveled all over the country. He had no money because you don't make money in bowling. And he was like working for a skilled tradesman that was at one of my properties doing renovations. He heard me listening to books all days. He's like, this dude's whack. I got to work for him. So he worked for me. He's like, what's this house hacking thing? Now, now he house hacks and bowls. Right. And so, and then now he's sort of given up the bowling thing, and he's a IT exec, and he's, but it means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. You and I are great examples of I'm a soon to be dad. You have 3 under 4. Of situations where we kind of call it luxury house hacking, where you find a place that has the resemblance of privacy. It can mean, a lot of different markets have a lot of different things. It can be condo situations. It can be, but maybe not the prototypical up down duplex that you hear the people stomping above you or whatever. Right. And so, it can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. What that means more to the listener, like what they actually want out of it than anything. But I mean, I know people, in the state around the country that just continue to do it. And they've done it 3, 4, or 5 times. Right. So, and Brandon Turner, Bigger Pockets, right. He's house hacking on the ocean in Hawaii. So, it can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, but it's definitely something that is replicable.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it, do you know people? I mean, are there people doing it not just in the United States, but that do it in Canada, I mean, it works in really any country, I would assume, correct?
For sure. And one thing that, there are a lot of reasons that we're blessed here in the United States, but one of those reasons is, for instance, in Canada, we have friends in Canada, quite a few of them. They don't have the government backed loans that we do as far as financing, right? So they have to pay higher percentage down, and they don't quite get the incentives. It's kind of similar, but we just, the FHA program, for instance, is phenomenal for people. For instance, a lot of people, my generation, your generation, have student loan debt, right? Which disqualifies them from not the student loan debt, but they might have a percentage that disqualifies them from a conventional. FHA will allow you to do that. One nice thing, if you're in the state of Michigan, I implore you to, I'm sure you got a fantastic mortgage company as well, but the one that I use in Birmingham, Michigan, the mortgage broker, I mean, he's the hardest worker I've ever met. He owns a bunch of motels and things like that, but he really understands the concept of house hacking. He was on that call with all those house hackers earlier. We all kind of like just push each other. But you can actually count the rent, the future rent on a property. Let's say you get a duplex, right? And it's a side by side. Let's say it's $1,000 a month each unit, right? Is what your projected rent is. He can take that $1,000, take it against the mortgage payment. Let's say your total mortgage payment is $1,500, right? I'm just throwing out numbers here. But let's say, projected rent is $1,000 on each side, $1,500 is the mortgage payment. So when you leave, you're anticipating roughly $500 in cash flow, right? And these are just the numbers, but those are kind of, that's where he can take that $1,000, take it, put it against that property. So you're really only having a $500 mortgage. Most people can qualify for a $500 a month mortgage, right? or maybe it's only $1,000 monthly payment because interest rates are so dramatically low. Here in Michigan, you can get a pretty nice property with a low interest rate environment for $1,000 a month, as you know, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
$1,000 a month goes a pretty decent way, when you're
Mm-hmm.
factoring tax and insurance too.
Yep.
So and maybe you still get the $1,000 in rent. So maybe you have $1,000 mortgage payment, $1,000 rent. So you're literally breaking even. He takes that all, wipes out the mortgage payment. You get in there, even though you have $100,000 in student loan debt. And, maybe somebody wants the house hack at some point. Maybe they want to pay that down. That's up to them. But just as an example, this is where it's at. So reaching out to mortgage lenders that actually understand this, which again, 95% of them are geared towards the consumer that's buying the single family, 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot ranch. That's totally fine. This is completely different. This is a whole new world. You have to find the kind of people that understand it. So reaching out to people like yourself that understand it and can lead you to the right people. Again, that goes back to the teamwork thing, just touching on it again. You have to find somebody that'll, rock stars hang with rock stars. That's one of my favorite things in the whole wide world. So if you reach out to Brandon's going to plug you in with his CPA, his lawyer, which will be your wife, your lender, local investors. You know what I'm saying? Like you understand it all. You had what was his name? Carson Demick, right?
Yes.
The wholesaler of Flint, right? If somebody wants to buy Flint properties, you have the connection, right? You can plug them in to Carson. Like rock stars hang with rock stars. Reach out to Brandon. Brandon's a rock star. He'll plug you in, and that's just, if you take that model and bring that into your personal life, you'll succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say that about Carson. I had someone to reach out to me. I was getting into the game, and I hooked him up with Carson. I was like, yeah, you gotta meet with Carson, and you guys are in a similar situation. And it's like you said, business is a team sport, right? I mean, it's just like that's all it is. Business is a team sport, and in school they teach you to be an individual. It's be an individual, don't collaborate, do everything on your own, try to be the smartest person in the world, and it's exactly opposite of business. So
if I could touch on that just real quick.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I came from the I read, I'm just like yourself, I see there's a million books behind you. I read in depth. I like understanding people's minds, more like psychology of why they write what they write, right? And so I came up with this concept a long time ago because I love Robert Kiyosaki and I love Dave Ramsey, because they both understand the psychology of what they're saying, right? Not everyone really does. Some people just write books to sell books. Those two people they really understand the psychology. And so, if I were to tell somebody like yourself that understands both of them that I like both of them, you're like, you're crazy, man. How the hell do you live in both those worlds? Because they hate each other, right? In all aspects. But I came from initially the Dave Ramsey world, right? And so just to give somebody that's analytical out there kind of a concept of why I like house hacking. I used to, if you're in the state of Michigan, you're probably familiar with Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons is my favorite coffee on the planet. And I used to like kick myself every time I'd get a coffee. I'm like, you idiot, that's, $2 that you just threw down the drain on coffee, right? And there are all these little things that we self-indulge in. Maybe people like going to concerts. Maybe they like, and listen, I'm all for saving money, but there are some things in life that give us actual joy. And a $2 coffee probably shouldn't be my focus at this stage in life. So I used to kick myself, like for spending that money. And then I read this book, Set for Life. Again, I can't, that's my favorite book on the planet. Scott Trench, CEO of Bigger Pockets. But he showed from an analytical standpoint, the difference between coffee, which food and things of that nature make up about 13% of the average American's budget, right? And that quantifies everything. That's all 3 meals, what I'm saying? Like 13% of the whole thing. Versus like 35%, which is the average American's housing expense. No matter if it's rent, no matter if it's mortgage, you're paying roughly about 35%. So I think the numbers is like 1.5% the average American spends on coffee. That's a high consumer. I don't know. I don't honestly even remember the numbers, but let's just say it's 1 to 1.5% of coffee. You take that number, that small number of a yearly, maybe $1,000 you spend a year on coffee if you're a heavy consumer, right? And you take that up against somebody that spends $1,000 a month on rent, and then they have to pay utilities and the other things that come along with owning a home or renting a home, right? And you compare those two things, it's not even close. It's not even close. So if you literally just house hack and you continue to indulge yourself in the things that bring you joy, like that's what it's all about. That's why I'm a big believer in it. It's not about necessarily penny pinching like Dave Ramsey. It's about merging it. And so kind of to go back to that, I came up with this concept that I think, at least for myself, because I'm a hedger, I don't like I like to, I'm an optimist, but I'm also someone that likes to focus on not only optimizing an investment. I like to minimize my risk at the same time, and I don't think they're mutually exclusive. And so the reason that I like Dave Ramsey and Robert Kiyosaki at the same time is it kind of quantifies that whole concept, right? To where Dave Ramsey talks a lot about the mindset. Like people often, one of the biggest fat question, frequently asked question of Dave Ramsey is, well, why wouldn't I pay my highest interest rate credit card that has, $10,000 on it rather than the lower interest rate, with $200 credit card? Like that doesn't make any mathematical sense. And his whole point is that this isn't mathematical, right? It's about our actions and retraining ourselves, and the mindset of seeing that credit card disappear for $200 is going to do way more than putting $1,000 on that $10,000 credit card that you're probably not going to finish because it's $10,000 and you obviously don't have great actions within your finance, right? And so that's why I like studying people like Dave Ramsey, even though he gets, a lot of people don't like him, especially in our community, especially in the real estate community. But I really do, because I understand I don't understand. I try to understand by reading his books, the mindset and the psychology that goes behind all of his decisions in his 7 baby steps, right? So again, I'm getting into weeds here again, but there are there are reasons beyond the scope of just house hacking. And one of those is I never gravitated towards the penny pinching. Even though I kind of was like, I really loved my freaking coffee, and I wanted to figure out how I could have a Tim Hortons coffee and not kick myself. And if you look at it in those terms, or if you eliminate 35% of your home expense, I think the average car, when you factor in insurance and gas and all, maintenance and all those on cars, is 17%. Now, again, right, if you look at different sites, different things, but I think the government quantifies it as about 17% of the average American. That's still half of what the housing expense is for the average American, right? So, So yeah, anyways, getting into weeds, but
no, and again, just to even probably go a little further down this road, I think this is, you touch on like the psychology and just how important I think all this is. And I think you said it already, like that's what fascinates you. I always talk to one of my partners, Aaron, we always talk about how fascinating buying psychology is, and just psychology in general, how people operate. You look at the political things going on in the world, like just human psychology and how people think and in what they do is just fascinating to me. And that's where you hit on something. It's, Kiyosaki always says there's 3 sides to every coin, right? There's each position, and then there's the edge, and you always want to be in the edge. You always want to be able to see what a Kiyosaki is saying and be able to see what a Dave Ramsey is saying, because sometimes they're saying different things. Like you said, I think a lot of times they're saying the same thing. They're just saying them in very different ways. And I think if people can people can read between those lines, then you win. At the end of the day, you're going to be winning because you can see both sides, mesh them together, or see how they do correlate, because they're different sides of the spectrum, but they are the same on the same plane though, and they use a lot of the same concepts with each other. Kiyosaki talks about the snowball and getting rid of bad debt. Well, that's all, Dave Ramsey is. And then Dave Ramsey talks about not getting into debt. Well, he doesn't say don't get into, good debt. He said talking about not getting into bad debt, right? And he owns real estate. He owns tons of real estate, so it's like, if you can read between the lines and stay on the edge, you're going to be way better off in life in general, whether it's political issues, whether it's, Kiyosaki and Ramsey, whatever it is. You have to be able to stay in the middle and on the edge. I think that's massive point that you brought up that very few people talk about, especially in our community. They don't talk much about, the Kiyosaki and Ramsey being the same.
If someone says, advanced like you or I are, a book I read just came out a couple months ago. It's called The Psychology of Money. It's the single best book I read last year. I don't know if you've had the chance, but it was a PhD's, and again, I now enjoy like more advanced books because I feel like I'm so dumb that I got to figure out these things from people that are actually smart. And so that's why I like hanging around people like yourself.
Books.
Yeah. And so literally, I'm reading this book, and the whole concept is that all these people try to make, mathematical models for how you should live your life. And they're like, well, listen, if you just put your money into, an S&P 500 and let it sit there for 30 years, you'll win. Well, guess what? People aren't mathematical, in their lives. They're emotional. They're incredibly emotional.
Yeah.
right? And so the concept of, so I get this a lot. I'm sure you do too. I'm going to wait until the market crashes to buy real estate because real estate's too high and I'm going to make money on real estate. Well, guess what? There are a lot of things going against you. First of all, CNBC, CNN, and Fox News are all going to tell you the world's falling when real estate's done, right? So good luck getting past that one if you're not already in it. Second of all, where are you going to get the money? Because credit squeezes, right? And so they shut off the supply of money. So all these federally backed, well, I'm not saying all of them, but the chances of you getting a federally backed loans is going to be incredibly lowered. For instance, I'm sure you experienced this. I had at least $1 million in the month of April get completely just wiped off the books because the whole world was up in a panic. The lending world was up in a panic. And they said all these, marginalized borrowers, they're like, listen, we can't do it right now. And so I had about over $1 million, just like that, say, nope, yep, we're on the doorstep of clear to close. We're done. We can't do it here. And so that's what happens when the economy turns. So some people say, oh, well, I'll just go get private money. Well, guess what? If you don't have a relationship with someone like Brandon, who lends money or whatever, like they're not just going to say, oh, we're in the, biggest recession since 2008 and 2008. And you're a 25-year-old kid on your first deal. Oh, that sounds like a great financial decision for me to give you $100,000. No, that's not going to happen. That's why a lot of these concepts like dollar cost averaging that Warren Buffett, is kind of a profiteer of, a lot of these things, that's where it comes in. And if you're house hacking, there's a few, I have 6. I've come up with sort of 6, and it's not even mine. I borrowed it from my good friend Chad Carson of Bigger Pockets. By the way, if anyone's out there looking for like a course or trying to model after, he's the most genuine, down to earth guy that isn't like some of these sleazeballs in the industry of real estate, courses. I think his course is like $800. Is by far, I don't want to try to sound like a salesman for him. Although, full disclosure, I am part of his course. I'm one of his teaching assistants in the specific thing of house hacking. I don't get paid, so it's not anything that I get paid for. But he is the most down to earth, genuine guy. No matter what facet of real estate you're trying to invest in, I can't say enough about him. But I mean, dollar cost averaging. If you like, for instance, 1% rule. If you're like investing in a suburb of Genesee County like you are, right? Probably a decent model is if you're trying to buy a $200,000 duplex in Flushing, Michigan, where Brandon is. You should probably, and again, rentometer.com is a great site to check this initially. It's in full disclosure there too. They're our podcast sponsor, so I don't want to sound like a salesman here, but it's probably about $2,000, right? $2,000 a month should be your gross rents that you're trying to achieve for. That's the one. That's the concept of the 1% rule. So if you can, I list 6. If you can kind of follow these base models, and that is the top one. That's the one. That's the big one. If you're in a lower market, maybe a 2% rule, maybe a 1.5% rule, right? If you can get above 1%, you're probably going to cash flow no matter what the market's doing, and it's so arbitrary what the value of your house is at that point. If you're investing long-term in real estate, I don't care if my house is worth, 300,000 or 200,000. It doesn't make any difference because my house brings it, that 4 unit brings in $3,500 a month. Doesn't matter what's going on. The whole, what we've been dealing with for the last year, we helped some of our, I have property management. So he's amazing. I highly advise it once you get to a certain point. I think it's important to get people that are skilled in specific niches, but we help certain, people. Listen, this isn't a business about screwing people. It's about working with people. But the place still does it no matter what's going on in the world. And that's where else are you going to find that? The stock market essentially shut off all dividend payments, right? If people are familiar, with that world, they basically shut that all off for 2020 or for a large part of it. And again, I don't invest in the stock market. But I do know people that, were getting dividends from large blue chip stocks. They're like, dude, they've been shut off for 6 months. So yeah, going on a rant, but.
Yep. No, I love it. We love rants. There's you talked about some good books. I mean, that's which we'll kind of get to here in a little bit. That was one of my questions a little bit. Is what are you reading right now? You've touched on a handful of them, but how important, I mean, just doing, not just house hacking, but just investing in general. I mean, I think you and I are probably biased, obviously, in the real estate sector. But again, I mean, you look at Donald Trump, and you don't need to get political, but people are up in arms about him not paying taxes, Or you look at a Robert Kiyosaki, you look at people out there, and the reason they're not paying taxes, I mean, you can kind of elaborate on that of why they're not, but it's in the environment we're going into where there's going to be a higher tax rate on everyone going forward. I mean, how important do you think truly investing in real estate investing, I should say, real estate investing, house hacking is for someone's portfolio going forward?
Yeah. So you look at, and you get this, but you look at just sort of at the average, $50,000 to $75,000 wage earner or whatever that owns a house. The barrier to entry to traditional real estate investing is quite high. Especially like in times like now, most banks are requiring like 6 months reserves on top of all the cash to close money. And so, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying more than anything, the mental barrier to putting that much hard-earned money into a place that you don't live at, that you're just a little bit nervous about, and all this stuff. It's quite high barrier to entry.
Yeah.
On top of all the many other reasons I'm a fan of this whole concept, is the barrier to entry, mentally is much, much lower. You buy a duplex, right? And you're living there. I don't think, and obviously there's some limiting beliefs and stuff that people have to work through. I don't think it's really the same concept, like mentally, as buying a traditional house. You're just doing a little different model, right? Like you're probably going to put 3 to 5% down, maybe 0% if you find the right loan product, but probably going to put a low percentage down versus a traditional investor that has to put 20 to 25% down, plus 6 months reserves, plus closing costs. You know what I'm saying? Like all these things add up. And so if they're buying $100,000 property, they might bring 30 or 35,000 or more to closing, plus need the 6 months reserves. Like that's a big barrier for most people, where you can buy that same $100,000 property for maybe $5,000 to $7,000 down, not necessarily need the any reserves, and you may be able to eliminate your monthly payment because the other side of the unit or multiple units pays for the mortgage, right? So that's sort of that concept. And again, I apologize, I forgot your question, but
no. So the question was just how important is it going forward to be involved in just real estate investing in general, house hacking, could be BRRRR, whatever, some ways to get into this and really kind of shelter yourself from the higher tax environment we're going into.
Yeah, no, I mean it's incredibly important. I see. I've been working with the accountant. I highly advise people not to do their own taxes if they want to do this whole world, because what they charge to take on the enormous complexities of what you and I do, to me, is just so incredibly cheap. Like I look at it as an investment, and that was the concept that I actually wanted to touch on earlier. I forgot to, with the whole Dave Ramsey side of things. There are, to every concept, whether you're looking at Kiyosaki's style or anyone else on that side of things, or like Dave Ramsey, there's always positives and negatives. And that's where kind of my nuanced perspectives have always been. I always evaluate things. Okay, that's fantastic. Let's look at the downside. Not that it's a bad thing. Let's just see how we minimize. One downside is that Dave Ramsey sort of promotes, and I'm not saying he does this intentionally, but the idea that almost everything's an expense if you spend money on it. Something that I learned, and I don't really know where or when I learned it, was the fact that not all expenses are expenses, right? And not all perceived expenses are expenses either, right? And so things like paying a CPA, in my opinion, is an investment. I mean, it's the best investment I do all year is pay my CPA to do my taxes. And so in saying all that, I have the unique opportunity to see large, I have a good W-2 salary. I have, six-figure 1099 salary from being an agent. And I have, we have quite a bit of gross rental income a year, right? And so I get to see the complexities of all three of those, which most people maybe, only have one or two of the other. But all income is not the same, right? And this, CPAs know this, and I'm not going to pretend to be a CPA. I'm just a fan watching them do their work. But Dave Ramsey or Kiyosaki talks a lot about it. Ordinary income, earned income, and investment income. Is that the three?
Yeah, like that. Earned, portfolio, and passive income. Correct.
Passive. Yeah, basically the same thing. And so they're not taxed the same, right? And then beyond that, for instance, we just bought a place like the 23rd of December and the week after Christmas, we put a ton, capital invested a ton of money in this property so that we could use that capital investment in the year 2020 to minimize our because in saying all that, you can take those capital investments, depreciate it against the rest of your income, right, and dramatically lower your taxable, your taxes paid. And again, consult somebody, because I am not at all a CPA. But yeah, investing, you can do an enormous amount of things. Please don't use what H&R Block or whatever the online services are to do it your DIY your taxes.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, if you're only wanting to do like W-2 and invest in the stock market, that's fine. But if you really want to get into this, there's so many things that you can take advantage of. Don't do it yourself. Don't do it yourself and then get audited because you did it wrong or whatever. Like, it's not worth it. Figure out, I meet with my CPA at least once or twice a year and say, I met with him in October. I'm like, here's where we are. He's telling me, here's where we are. This is what we're going to pay. I'm like, great. What do we do about, lowering that? Because, I go tax exempt from my W-2 job. And so I don't pay federal taxes until the end of the year. And so I'm like, great. How do we go about lowering that? He's like, well, let's make a, X amount of capital investment. And so I'm like, great, let's go find another property. So we go find another property. Not only do we make the capital investment of the down payment, but now we're making the capital investment of dramatically increasing the property. And by the way, even though the market is really high, there are a lot of lazy landlords out there that have owned properties for, several years that, try to DIY landlording. And not that that's bad, but you have to, that's why we pay property managers, because they're on top of things. They understand. So DIYing landlording, they got completely taken advantage of during this entire pandemic that we're in, right? That have properties that are, that have sat vacant or tenants that haven't paid, the rent in 10 months or whatever. And that's what I found in this property, was somebody who was a complete hoarder. I mean, it was just a mess. And so we agreed to, we got to a conclusion that we would have, these tenants be removed before closing. And so we came in, I ended up filling like 40 yards of dumpster with this one particular unit of hoarding. It was disgusting. But, made a large capital investment in this property. And now we get to take that capital investment, depreciate against earned income. So, so many things you can do in this world, so many tax advantages. Depreciation is, I don't know anything like it. The fact that you can take a property
magic.
Magic. What phantom income, right? That's what Kiyosaki and them call it.
Exactly.
But you can take a property that, generally speaking, is going up in value. Your duplex in Flushing, don't know what you paid for it, don't care, but it's probably gone up at a percentage of what you bought it for. And at the same time, over the course of however long you've had it, you've also told the IRS that property is going down in value, because that's what depreciation is, saying that over I think it's 27 and a half years or whatever it is, that this property is going down in value. So you get to depreciate it while it's going up in value, while you're getting paid. So you're it's magic. Like you said, you can't describe it any other way. That's what real estate is. That's what real estate provides. And so having a CPA, having those conversations, listen, if you go to your CPA now about your 2020 taxes, good luck. You can't do anything about it, right? But if you go to your CPA now, not only about 2020 taxes, but about 2021 taxes, then you go back to them in, September and say, hey, listen, here's what we've done for 2021. What do you think? He's like, well, you're an idiot here. Like he tells me, how about we do this, and this, and we go about doing it, right? And that again, goes back to teamwork. I'm not saying this has to happen overnight. I totally understand why you'd want to DIY your taxes if you're just, you're just not, I don't even want to say starting out, but you're just kind of getting into this. You have W-2 income and that's it. Fantastic. DIY your taxes. But there's going to come a point where you're going to want to do that. If you want to DIY the landlord thing, fantastic. I did it. I think it's you have to understand. I mean, I think there's a lot of benefits to DIYing it, right? House hacking, I think, is the ultimate one, because you're living right next to them, right? If they're smoking, dope or something, and you don't want, you can figure it out pretty easily.
Right.
But there comes a time where if you want to actually build a business, you got to hire the right people and build that team. So I don't like, a lot of these gurus and stuff are like, oh, let's start out, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, but again, it goes back to the stages. I have this concept of like, you have to be able to identify the stage you're in, react to that stage the way that you should, like the if you're I was trying to get out of GM at 30, right? I don't want to get in the weeds. I keep going down these rabbit holes, but I wanted to get out of the stage. I wanted to get out of GM at before I turned 30. And so I identified that I was in the growth stage. And so the concept of growth means that you have to highly leverage, to be, generally speaking, leveraging allows greater percentage of returns, that allows you to kind of exponentially increase. Well, I also identified that there's going to come a point where I'm probably going to step back and say, all right, and we're kind of to that point, my wife and I now, all right, well, let's try to minimize our risk too, and get our portfolio to a nice position that we like it. So now we're not only capitalizing on the growth potential, but now we're minimizing our downturn, right? And so, I don't know what exactly ours is, but we literally have put like 3% or 3.5 or lower percentage down on our house hacks. Our portfolio is above 40%, across the board, as far as debt, loan to value. And again, getting into weeds for a lot of people, but it's just the concept that like you have to identify what stage you're in, react accordingly, and not all stages are created equally. And it's a concept I developed, as a kid in like a religious, the whole religion community. No matter what somebody's takeaway of religion is, it's not the point. Like they are very, they stress a lot this concept, and that's where I developed it. Where like you're in a stage of your religious development, right, or whatever. But I also took that to apply to your personal finance or your stage of wealth building, if you want to call it that. To where you identify the stage you're in, you then react accordingly to that stage, and when you jump to the next stage, you alter slightly your risk tolerance. You identify what matters to you. Not everyone's going to want to build a 1,000-unit portfolio, and you don't have to. You look at like somebody like Chad Carson. I just can't say enough about who he is and how I model my whole life around him. Is the fact that he built this massive portfolio in his 20s, and he took a step back. He's like, I don't want to just be a real estate investor. Like, having, I don't know how many he had, maybe 150 or whatever in his portfolio of single and multifamily houses. But he's like this isn't just what I want. So he cut that from like, let's just say 150, and I think he's got like 92 properties now or something like that. Mm-hmm. Or 92 units, doors. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how it breaks down, but anyways, he cut it. He's like, these properties don't matter to me. Let's turn everything over to property management. Him and his wife live in Ecuador for like 6 months out of the year because his wife's a Spanish teacher, and they want to, bring their kids up in kind of an environment like that to be able to teach them a language and be able to communicate with locals. I mean, I'm not saying people have to do that, but right. He identified this. He identified, the freedom. Yep. What your whole podcast is about. Yep. He identified the stage he was in. He said, listen, we've grown all the way here. I was in the growth stage. I wanted to get to 150. I got the 150. That's not the only thing that matters in life. I also want to do X, X, and X. So let's so that's what that whole stage process, looks like in practicality.
Yep. No, I love it. And it's, it's like you said, you touched on so much of that, which was, why all this is so important, entering the environment we're going into, which is, again, higher tax rate environment, et cetera. So, I appreciate you breaking that down. It's huge. And I think you touched on advisors as well, which I don't know who said this. I can't remember where I heard this in the last couple of years, but it was a saying someone had, which is the wealthy, they pay people to do their taxes and then invest themselves. And the poor and the middle class try to do the taxes themselves and pay other people to invest their money. And it was just very, telling. And it's exactly what you just explained. And that's one of my biggest pet peeves, I think, being in a service industry, and you can relate to this, is people will not spend any time. Like, I think if like realtors, it's like 80% of realtors or 80% of people pick the first realtor they interview or they see. And people will not spend the time up front to find any advisor, whether it's CPAs, bookkeepers, realtors, doesn't matter who it is. And then they get into trouble down the line, property manager, whatever it is. And then they're complaining. And then they're like, what was me? And it's like, well, you didn't spend the time finding an awesome property manager, like you mentioned, or you didn't spend the time finding a CPA or someone who can help you and do your due diligence up front. And everyone wants to like just do one thing and do very little work, and then hopefully it pans out in the end. And I think that's something that really just grinds my gears a ton. So you opened up Pandora's box for me when you were talking about that.
You know what the greatest shortcut to that is out there? The best way I can quantify it? like I said earlier, rock stars hang with rock stars. If you, the consumer, choose Brandon as your realtor, he's going to plug you in with all the rest of those, right? That's the quickest shortcut,
Easy.
because it's not always, I mean, we don't, like when you step in a new world, you don't always know what to look for in a lender. And probably the majority of lenders are going to say, that, oh, I'm the best lender in the industry. That could be true, but they might be the best single family, like a single family buying a traditional house lender in the industry. They're not speaking the same terms as what you're looking at. And I'm certain that you think the same way that I do. The thing that a rock star hates more than anything is, let's just take, I'm not to pick on lenders, but like I guarantee Brandon, can't stand dealing with mediocre lenders, right? Like, I mean, there's just something about it. Like the majority of lenders, and again, I understand that people have lives and all this kind of stuff, but the thing that I can't, as somebody that like loves to I'm a workaholic, self-admitted. I just love it. It's something that's in me. I can't stand calling a realtor or a lender at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, and they're out golfing. Oh, I'll call you in 4 hours and I'll get that pre-approval to you, on Friday. I'm like, all right, well, that doesn't help me. Like I hang with rock stars that also love the industry. They're the best at what they do. That's why Rocky Ballore, like as I said earlier, in Birmingham, the dude will call me on a 10 p.m. on a Saturday, and we'll sit there and have an hour-long conversation about a client or a personal deal of mine. And then beyond that, relationships, especially in the lending industry. And again, we're going down rabbit holes, but like, there is no better advocate for you as a consumer than having a lender speaking on your behalf. For instance, we closed on a non-QM loan last year. Rocky and I, Rocky was my mortgage broker. And non-QM loans are really, really, really challenging. So, if people are trying to buy, $40,000 to $80,000 properties that are investment properties, and I don't know what by the time you do the 20% down, gets you down. I don't know what that cutoff is. Probably 60,000, or I forget what it is. Yeah. As far as like the actual loan value, they can be really, really, really challenging. And so, Rocky, because we have such a great relationship, was an advocate on my behalf to get such a low interest rate on a non-QM loan. And again, that's all in the weeds. But the point is developing these relationships, and you can literally borrow Brandon's relationships. That's why rock stars hang with rock stars. If you go to the local lawyer, he's going to say, oh, this dude has one property and he might not be for real. He might not give you, I'm not saying he's going to sell you short, but you might not get the premium service to where you say, hey, I'm Brandon's client, right? Brandon sends him a ton of service. You also, use him personally. He's like, oh, this is Brandon's client. Let's treat him with the utmost respect, because I also want, you can borrow people's relationships as well. So that goes back to your point.
Yep. It's huge. No, I mean, that's well said. I mean, you put it very succinctly. I mean, you can borrow people's relationships, rock stars, hang out with rock stars. It's very poignant. What's I know we've been going for a little over an hour here. What's the best story you've heard from someone house hacking? A huge win someone had. Is there anything like that comes to mind? Something where someone can tangibly kind of like, oh, I can see that. Like, wow, that's like, I had that same situation. I could have done that, or maybe I could do that. Anything where it's like, I had someone tell me this awesome story they had, or some huge win they've had from house hacking.
A lot of them sort of come to mind. A brief story. We've got a friend. He ended up doing. I think it was $1.2 million with only $30,000 out of pocket. So he used 3 FHA loans on multifamilies, and only had to bring $30,000 out of pocket to borrow $1 million. Which is how the hell can you do that, right? And so. And he did that in a couple stages. So that's a huge win. But maybe our most recent podcast, my first time I had my wife on the show, and this other couple, they call themselves the Phi couple. They're huge. They're great friends of ours. They're in New York. Fantastic people. I mean, that was my favorite episode. But we talked a lot about like some people are married or have potential spouses, or whatever your situation is, right? And a lot of objections, rightfully so, come from your significant other that may see the world a little bit different, and for good reason. Like my wife, saw the world a lot different than I do, which a lot of husbands could probably relate to. And so I had to go about it, marketing my strategy a lot different. And so Allie, my wife, and Allie from the Five Couple, they talked a lot about it on the fact that like what this particular guy and myself saw was the numbers didn't relate at all to them. They could, to my wife and them, like they could care less that we were making $1,000 a month. Like, great, how about you just go work some extra overtime? You can also make $1,000 a month. Like that that isn't their language of communication.
Yes.
And so, as a marketer yourself, and and a bit of a marketer myself, I had to change my marketing pitch to my wife, and it was same to them. And so they've now gone on to House Hack several times. And but it all came to, all right, and it's same thing for me. I was living in like a 450 square foot, one bedroom when my wife and I, decided to get married. And she's like, yeah, that's not going to work. And so she's like, let's go to a 2-bedroom. And I'm actually about to lose my office space here in this 2-bedroom because my daughter's taking it. So I'm like in exile here. I gotta move everything back to my office at Remax. But she's like, listen, that's not gonna work. I'm not living there. I'm not living in those confined spaces. My bedroom's bigger than that. And she comes from one of the premier suburbs of Metro Detroit. So her, she's like, yeah, we're not gonna do that. So I'm like, listen, well, how about we do this? How about we get this? I think I had just bought it or something. But I'm like, how about we do this? This duplex. And instead of doing like the small one, the less. How about we actually I should take that back. She was the one that convinced me, and I'm like, no. But she's like, we're doing that, or I'm not living there, and it works, right? And so the marketing, so that's a big win. I feel like, more quantifiable to where for both of our situations with our wives, we had to say, all right, there's a compromise here for good reason. My wife was thinking more family building. I was thinking more wealth building. How about we do both at the same time, right? And there's a way to do that, and you have to market differently, because by me telling my wife we're going to make X amount of money, or we're going to build X amount of wealth, or my CPA says we can depreciate taxes, that ain't going to work. Like that doesn't work for her. So I think that may be the biggest win. Obviously, the $1 million or several others, but that's a huge win, because that's an objection sometimes.
Yeah, it is. No, that's a huge win. And it's that's a whole, you could have a whole podcast episode on that, which you guys did, talking about spousal relationships and, your partner, and just doing things together and being, talking the same language, making sure you're on the same page. That's huge, because as you said, that stops up a lot of people actually, because they're not on the same page, they're not communicating and on the same plane. So that's a huge win. I'm glad you said that. Cool. Well, wrap it up here with the last couple little things here. You already touched on books, Set for Life. What are some books you are reading now, maybe, or that you're finding it really interesting and loving, or some stuff in the past? Like we said, Set for Life, we've mentioned. And then, maybe some passion stuff and passion projects, maybe you're working on the side. What are you kind of doing for fun right now, but also, some books and stuff you're learning and loving right now?
I think I have over like 150 Audible, tracks and stuff. Yeah. So I have read a lot. The last little bit, like full disclosure, I've kind of gravitated a little bit away from books. Not that I don't like them, but a lot of books, specifically in real estate, a lot of them are similar, not the same, but they're just similar. And you can, as somebody, I wrote a book just on the concept of house hacking. Not that I'm anything special, but like just to quantify it to people, if somebody want to read it, it's free. You can go on our website, househackingsuccess.com. If somebody was wanting to read just the basics of it, it's a short book. But like, the way that people structure it, and there's certainly a number. There's most of the time there's like a number of chapters that are pretty similar, kind of a build up to something, and then you got the climax of it, and then you got the whatever. And so so I'll read books that are kind of intriguing in a specific niche of real estate or something like that. But I've sort of, I don't want to say graduate, I've sort of moved to like broadening my horizons on life, like just understanding different things that I would have never enjoyed before, like for instance, history. All right. And things like that, like understanding, that's why I've gravitated to your podcast and like what you guys are doing. So I actually like podcasts a lot more these days. Just like every other middle-aged guy, not that I'm yet middle-aged, but Joe Rogan is just incredible. I listen to almost every podcast he brings on. He brings on the most diverse, like he just brings on every possible type of, like he just literally just takes people that are intriguing to him. He's like, you sound fun. I'll probably get hammered by this particular group or that particular group for bringing you on, but I don't care.
Yep.
I'm doing what I want because I can do it because I'm free. And,
Yep.
you talked about us going over our, time slot. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't care. My wife and I hit our, financial freedom number before we got married, a couple years ago, whatever. So
Yep.
like, I do, I attempt to, I've given myself the grace to do whatever I want almost,
Yes.
and so what I read is what I've kind of given myself the freedom that Rogan gives himself, where I literally will just read or listen to a podcast on something completely unrelated.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I just, and so, but the last book, I can't even remember the last, we just read one. I can't remember, but I just, I go to an array of different topics.
Yeah.
I like to, because they're so interchangeable,
Take
like
lessons from other walks of life. Yeah.
My goodness, I take inspiration for my real estate, whether it's agent or investing or whatever, from totally unrelated subjects. Like I'm fascinated with the history of the presidents.
Right.
So I've spent a lot of time in the last few months just kind of understanding my history, because I literally slept my entire way through high school in history class, probably failed it. I don't know, but like I wasn't a great student. I didn't care, and I didn't know the connections. And so
Yep.
I feel the more I learn, the number I feel. Like I tell people all the time, like I am attracted to people that are smart because I feel like I'm dumb. And so my property manager, he happens to be General Motors employee too. Him and I have had this book club for like 4 years, and he's one of the smartest guys I've ever met. When I met him, he was, he had that's why I don't like to say that I had a rough childhood, because there are people that actually had rough childhoods, and like, and I don't feel like I deserve to say that I have a rough childhood when people, and so this guy, going down the rabbit hole, but like he had a legitimate rough childhood. His parents told him his whole life that he was worthless and that he would never amount to anything. So when I met him, he was a early 30s guy that thought that of himself. And I just like smart people. I'm like, dude, you're the smartest person I ever met. Like this dude, as far as mathematics, it's just like, but he didn't think of himself. I'm like, dude, what are you talking? So we started reading. Long story short, now he house hacks. He's building a portfolio. He managed my property. Him and I have read for 4 years. We read in all kinds of, different topics, but I'm just gravitated. I literally just collect friends that are smarter than me in totally unrelated fields. And just that's my inspiration. So it's a lot less books now. It's a lot more figuring out that I'm dumb as shit and that I need to find people that actually know what they're doing in this world, and just trying to draw a small amount of inspiration from them, learn as much as my dumb brain can comprehend, and that's really where I'm at as far as like reading. So I'm sorry that I don't have a great example, but books like Set for Life, if you're just starting out, maybe you're in your 20s, 30s, doesn't really matter. If you're trying to build a model for getting out early, Set for Life is the best book. It takes my concept of merging Kiyosaki with Dave Ramsey and actually quantifies it better than I ever could. And it's not that long of a book. He's got the Bigger Pockets Money Show. He's a good friend of mine as well. And he takes the concept of like index fund. He does index fund investing, house hacking, and he merges the two. Right. And then that's his blueprint. That doesn't have to be your blueprint. His book isn't trying to convince you to invest in index funds, but he shows you, listen, if you want to get out at X date,
right,
you have to build X amount of income. You also potentially, if somebody wants, don't have to pay active manager fees by doing index fund. I'm not advocating for it. He does. So I'll let him do that. But again, he breaks down the idea that it's about, how about we take our biggest expense and marginalize that, because so one thing he said that I didn't touch on, he talks about fixed incomes versus variable income or expenses, fixed expenses, variable expenses. I had never thought about it like that before. He's like, Dave Ramsey focuses on your variable expenses. Oh, you pay coffee, right? Let's eliminate that. Oh, you go to the movies, or back when we could go to concerts, you go to concerts, let's eliminate those things. He goes, if you literally eliminate your car payment and your housing payment, from the government statistics, that's 50% you just saved. You can't possibly, you don't even have 50% of your budget to variable expenses. You can't possibly cut enough things out of your life to even come close to those two things. So fantastic book.
Yep. No, thanks for going on the road. I think it's a great book, obviously, that anyone just starting out, or anyone even down the road a little bit, can really get into and learn a lot from. So Brad, I'm honestly thank you for coming on. I mean, dude, your passion, your energy is palpable, obviously, and I think there's one thing. I think if anyone gets one thing out of that, it's that, and your passion for what you do. So, thank you for coming on. What's the best way people can come find you and engage with you, talk to you, meet you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're in the state of Michigan, I mean, I know it's a little bit challenging to meet up now, but you can certainly hit me up. I'm Bradley LaBrie on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. House Hacking Success on Instagram and other mediums. Househackingsuccess.com. Honestly, like I said earlier, our goal with that was to build a community, and we thought maybe we could find a few people in our area, like in Michigan. That was literally it, and it's just turned into this thing where now we have friends around the country. I'm sure you do too. It's just like, it's something I couldn't even fathom what we've done. We have almost 40,000 followers on Instagram, heavily engaged. We're constantly, our goal was never to monetize. It still isn't. Like, it's not something that was ever a money grab. It's literally, it's building relationships around the country and helping people succeed. But more importantly, just like, I need accountability. Like, that's really everything I've done in my life was just like bring people in here to hold me accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah, right.
starting that, like, I have people that, that now I just like, I leverage their ability to actually be disciplined, where, I'm not a very disciplined person. And I'm like, oh crap, like this person does this, like I better do it. And so that's what it's all about. It's all about building community. And we've really done that. And so I implore people, like, if you're actually going down this rabbit hole, come join us. It's not at all about, money or anything like that. Like, almost everything we do is free. I mean, we have a very, I think it's like $50 or $100 or whatever for our course. Like, we're not at all out for the money. It's like, we try to provide enormous amount of value. The book is free if you if you want an ebook or whatever. But if you don't, no problem at all. DM me. We like to just help people, and I can't think of a better way, just because of government statistics, like 35% the average American spends on housing. I can't think of a better mathematical way to achieve financial freedom or freedom in general than starting out that way.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, man. Last thing is, I mean, any last words of advice, any parting quotes, last words of advice, anything to leave the viewers with?
I think, yeah, I'll say this. I think the number one, if somebody's like analytical, which I'm not, but if somebody's analytical and wants to quantify one thing that will set them up to go down to financial freedom, it's savings rate. And it's not coming from the perspective of maybe somebody like Dave Ramsey, which Dave Ramsey's fantastic. I think you should start out there. But it's doing, modeling my life, not after me, but the way I model after many others, which is, you have to be optimistic. You have to set yourselves high. You have to be, you have to really love the upside. But if you focus only on the upside, you'll get whacked by the downside. You'll just absolutely will. It doesn't matter if it happens now or 20 years from now. You're gonna get wiped out, probably, more than likely. Percentages are incredibly high against you if you don't also focus a little bit on the downside. So if you can set that barrier for savings rate, right, as that metric, and the greatest percentage, if you're going by percentages, to help exponentially increase that, is house hacking. And then if you do that a second time, now you take the rental income plus the new savings on your second one, and you combine them together to increase that savings rate even further down from what you're spending, because that's covering your living expenses and all of that. And if you can focus on that one metric, no matter what you do, whether it's stock investing, it doesn't matter. If you focus on that one metric over time, I can't think of a better metric to track for your life. Like net worth, who cares? Like that's so arbitrary, right? Like, times go up and down, but cash flow is, as cash flow is king. But quantifying that even further is, savings rate is king, in my opinion, because it takes all of those concepts, cash flow, whatever, and it combines them into one metric that helps you stay on that course no matter what the market's doing, no matter what's going on in the world, and help you achieve financial freedom.